Greetings to all you Ampaholics out there in YouTube land. It's been a while, but Jack and Rusty and I decided it was time to get back into the video production biz. So here we are. I always keep an eye on Craigslist to see if anything interesting pops up, and this amp has been on here for a while, probably 2 or 3 weeks. Vintage K amplifier, $425. The photos show a nice top, a decent, I guess that's the front with the K emblem. The dashboard looks pretty good, and it's sort of fuzzy pictures. And let's see, the description is 1960s to 70s vintage K amplifier, cream color, only $425. For more info, call. Well, you gotta love that the cream color was important, and also that $425 is considered to be a very reasonable price. We'll see. I called the guy and asked several questions. Does it work? What happens when you plug it in and turn it on? Is it tube or is it solid state? Because K made a bunch of solid state amps in the mid-60s, and I sure don't want to drive 25 miles over really congested roads to look at a solid state K amplifier, especially one that's cream colored. Okay, so the answers I got to my inquiries were really to the point and very helpful. They were I don't know, and I don't know, which at least was consistent. So confronted by some fuzzy photographs, a rather high asking price, and absolutely no information about condition, what idiot would ever get in their car and take off to go take a look at this amp? Well, I think you can guess. And to be honest, once I got there, did some testing and checking, and I ended up buying it. So let's take a look at what I got. Step one in any return home after new acquisition is the ceremonial sniffing of the Tolex and the grill cloth. This hard work is generally rewarded with a cookie. Thanks, Rusty. You earned it. Hey, Rusty, are you ready to help me lift this heavy amp up onto the exam table? Huh? Are you ready? Oh, I guess you have more pressing personal matters to tend to. Well, since Rusty was preoccupied, I went ahead and suffered a bilateral hernia lifting this behemoth up onto the exam table. But now that it's up there, let's take a look at what we got. A great deal or a major hosing? Well, first off, we see that the grill cloth's in pretty good shape, other than some stains probably incurred during a concert at Wembley Stadium. The K insignia is here proudly. It looks like it's made from the same material that the pick guards were made from. We're going to check out the so-called Tolex. It's more like almost like a really thin vinyl wallpaper that goes around, and lo and behold, the all-important Elvis sticker is placed here in the upper right corner to commemorate his life and untimely death. So forever and ever, this will be always known to me as the Elvis Amp. Okay, probably used in several of his concerts. Okay, all the way around you see it shows a lot of wear and some abuse. No big holes in the grill cloth. Okay, let's take a look at the side. Well, this is pretty disgusting. Apparently this side was laid down on a damp concrete surface, probably in a storage bin or something like that, and a nice crop of mildew grew here, and the glue that holds the wallpaper, Tolex, to the side has been dissolved and let loose. So I'm going to have to glue all this down and clean up this wretched mildew. I'm afraid the EPA might close me down if I don't. The other side, which is probably up, looks great. It's too bad it couldn't have been stored with all the sides up, eh? Now let's take a look at the top of the Elvis amp, and we see that Scotty Moore wasn't all that heavy of a smoker. I only see one cigarette burned, but it looks like some beer bottles were set on here to me. Okay, overall in pretty good shape with the magnificent gold anodized end pieces for the original handle. Well, we turn it around and lo and behold, there's grill cloth on the back of this amp, and it's in better shape than the front, which I guess makes sense. I'm guessing that there are vent holes cut in the baffle to let the tube heat out. I would think that that would be hampered somewhat by the presence of grill cloth. Let's take a look at the control panel. Again, some shredding of the pseudo Tolex. 3 instrument inputs. They say bass amp. We'll try to figure out why they say that or if it's a legitimate claim. Got our volume and tone controls, but these are, although they're very nice knobs, are not the correct knobs, because when you've got numbers here, unless it's a vernier, that's not going to make much sense. So these can't be the right knobs. The right knobs would have just a little white marker that would show you where you're positioned. Okay, and then it says amp here, which is always helpful. We've got our pilot light, and it's real nice that they labeled it for us. AC switch, and the all-important 3 amp fuse. 120 volt AC requirement. Now, a lot of people think on the older amps, and this is about a 66, that it should say 110 volts, but it doesn't. It says 120, which is really compatible with modern wall socket voltages. 50 or 60 cycle, which is nice. 100 watts, and some people say, oh great, 100 watt amp. Well, no, that's the power consumption, not the power production. The amperage intake would be 0.83 amps. So the 3 amp fuse is a little, almost 4 times above what the normally expected influx of current would be. Lovely corner here. Let's undo the 1 or 2 screws that are left here in this baffle and see what's inside. Well, before we open Pandora's box, let's try to make an educated guess here on what we're going to see inside. Moisture damage, most of the screws missing from the back access panel. I bet you're thinking this thing has been worked on by 7 chimpanzees with crowbars, okay? That's sort of what I thought too. Let's go ahead and pull the panel and see if that's true. Okay, the access panel is removed, and as you can see, there's all sorts of ports here, supposedly to allow cooling of the tubes and transformers. It was strange because it looked like this had been removed many times. There are only like 3 screws holding it on, but it still was stuck to the, probably in the wallpaper paste that they used to apply the Tolex. I had to actually break it loose, so maybe this back hasn't been off all that much. Maybe they just needed screws and they took them from this cabinet. Okay, without further ado then, let's take a look inside. And lo and behold, overall in really nice shape, with the schematic still glued to the wall of the cabinet, probably with the same wallpaper paste they used for the papery Tolex. We see a smaller chassis than you might expect from a cabinet of this width, but it's a nice one. Well, the chassis may not be full width, but it certainly features a very large, impressive power transformer and an equally huge output transformer. The tubes are a little unusual also. The first tube we encounter is a 7199, which is an extremely rare and hard to find tube. They run around $60 now, I believe, for used ones. This one's going to serve dual purpose, and one of them will be for phase inversion. Second unusual tube is a 5879 preamp tube. I've seen these used in some Gibson amps, but they're rather uncommon. Next very pleasant surprise is a pair of RCA black plate 6L6s and a 5U4 rectifier. Not my favorite rectifier, but apparently it works in this circuit. At the rear here is going to be the electrolytic capacitor can, which due to some fresh solder I see at the bottom grounding it to the chassis makes me think it's been replaced. If it was done right, that's probably also a very positive feature. Well, I'm beginning to get rather enthusiastic about this amp. Beautifully crafted chassis with very impressive transformers, beautiful, good original tubes. I just don't see what could go wrong here, unless of course the 7199 has failed, in which case I'll commit suicide by throwing myself on a hot soldering gun. Next we swing upward for an even more pleasant surprise, and that is a giant 15-inch Jensen Concert electronic music speaker. One of the best speakers, in my opinion, that Jensen ever made. It has a cover on the rear covering the magnet, which you may think is an Alnico magnet because of the cover, but no, it is a ceramic magnet speaker. The cone appears to be in perfect shape, and we see from the date code that this is indeed a Jensen speaker from the 16th week of 1966, which would date the amplifier probably at about that same year. All right, now let's take a look at the circuit diagram of the K720 bass amplifier. We'll see here that the first tube that the incoming signal will encounter will be the 5879. Now what's unusual about this is it is a pentode rather than a triode. Probably 95 to 98% of all amplifiers use a triode as the first preamp tube. There are certain advantages to a pentode first tube, and I'm going to put a link in the description of this video, and for those of you who'd like to read more about this, please follow that link. If you notice, there are 3 identical grid stopper resistors of 100K feeding into the grid, and there's also a 1 megohm grid leak resistor and an 820 ohm cathode biasing resistor. The plate resistor is the standard 100K. Now I'm going to prepare a video in the near future that explains what these resistors do and how altering their value can affect the performance of the amplifier. But for now, let's just accept that the signal has come into the grid of the 5879 pentode. It is exited from the plate, passing through a 0.1 microfarad coupling capacitor, past the volume control, past the tone control, and feeds into the grid of the pentode stage of the 7199 tube. Now what's unusual about the 7199 is that it has 2 stages, 2 portions, just like a 12AX7 has 2 triodes, except the 7199 has a pentode and a triode stage all within the one single glass envelope. So we're going to feed into the pentode stage where we will have increased amplification, a second stage of amplification, and then it will be fed into the grid of the triode stage, which will serve as the phase inverter for the circuit. Here's something else about the 7199 that's unusual. If you notice, the plate from stage 1 feeds directly into the grid of stage 2 without a coupling capacitor. When I first saw this, I thought it might be a typographical error, but it's not. This is the standard way that this tube is wired. Now, the triode portion of the 7199 is going to act as a standard cathodyne phase inverter. The plate will feed through a 0.02 microfarad coupling capacitor to the grid of the upper 6L6. The inverted signal on the cathode will feed through another 0.02 microfarad coupling capacitor into the grid of the lower 6L6. Hopefully, other than the rather unusual pentode first preamp tube and the 7199 tube, this will all be fairly routine for those of you who have been following my videos. You'll see then that the output from the plate, Jack, we don't need your help. The output from the plates then feed into that big husky output transformer that we saw on the chassis. We see that the power supply will begin down here with the standard 5U4 rectifier tube. The B plus then will first be smoothed by a 40 microfarad filter capacitor to ground, go past a 50 ohm resistor, another 40 filter capacitor. These will be in that metal can that we saw that's probably been changed on top of the chassis. Now the smoothed B+ will be fed through the primary windings of the center tapped jack, outer output transformer directly into the plates of the 6L6, and the screen voltages will be reduced slightly by 47 ohm resistors and fed into the screens of the 6L6s. And for fans of the depth capacitor, here it is down here, 0.05 microfarads. Of course, I will check it. And Jack is checking it right now for us, and we'll see if there's any leakage. I never have seen any, but there's always a first time. You'll also notice that this circuit has no negative feedback loop, and that none of the cathodes have cathode bypassing capacitors, which probably impacts on the tone and volume. Adding cathode bypass capacitors, as we have seen, increases the volume of the output, and also actually boosts bass frequencies. So in a supposed bass amp, it seems very strange to me that they're not present. You'll also notice that the B+ comes up here through this rail and goes through additional smoothing stages before it's fed into the plates of the preamp tubes. The closer you are to the front of the circuit, the smoother the B+ has to be. As you move through the amplifier, the smoothness is less significant. Okay, finally, let's discuss the Jensen Concert speaker. It's a model EM1500. Of course, the 15 refers to the diameter. It has a 27-ounce Syntox 6 ceramic magnet, and it has a 60-watt power handling capacity. One thing that's really unusual about these speakers is that the voice coil support is made of fiberglass, and the voice coil itself is coated in a material that resists heat. So as you can see, this really is a heavy-duty speaker. In addition, the EM1500, as in this particular amplifier, has a resonance in air of 65 cycles per second, as opposed to 90 cycles per second for a regular guitar speaker. So it says bass on the front of the amp, and the speaker they chose for it should be able to portray bass frequencies very, very well. The twin of this, that is for guitars, is a model EM1501. Well, that about does it here for part one. We found the amp, bought the amp, dragged it home, checked it out physically, and then checked its circuit in detail. In part two, let's take a look at the chassis, do whatever work is needed on it, and maybe add some bypass capacitors to some of these tubes, and then try it before and after and see what type of sound difference it makes. Okay, I hope that you'll join me then and see how the amp turns out. Meanwhile, I really appreciate your time and interest, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.